John Fokker, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Robby. Happy to be here.
Happy New Year's. It's nice to see you again.
Likewise.
You're currently the head of Trellix Threat Intelligence team and have an extremely impressive 18-year career behind you, chasing bad guys in cyberspace. So you've worked in counterterrorism, high-tech crime. You've been the project leader for the Dutch police and the NoMoreRansom Project.
Correct.
NoMoreRansom Project, I should say. And the last 5 years, you've been leading the security research efforts and takedowns together with law enforcement from Trellix.
Correct. Yes.
In other words, you have seen some things, a lot of things.
Well, if I stare off in the distance with that glare, then snap me out of it. But no, it's been we've done a lot of cool stuff. Yeah. I'm blessed, if I might say so, for a career. It's been a ride.
Yeah. And I have a million questions for you today, but my first one, all that cool thing, all this cool stuff you've done and all the great work you've put in, what have you appreciated the most?
Wow, that's an awesome question. I think if I look back during the career, it's being blessed that I've always been able to work in a high performance team and with coworkers. We help customers, we help society. So there's a saying, I think, in the Marine Corps. It's like normal people wake up in the morning and they question themselves if their life has meaning. Well, somebody who's in the Marine Corps doesn't, because you know what it is. And not that former Marine, but still that same feeling you have with working with the team I have now within Trellix. It's like you wake up every day and you try to do the right thing, try to find the bad guys, help our customers, help law enforcement, and that's a good balance. They call it soulful work in our company.
Soulful work. Do or die, semper fi.
Yeah.
And on the opposite side of that question, I'm guessing you've put a few bad guys behind bars, or you've shut down some bad operations. So what has been like the more uncomfortable side of your work?
Well, I come from a very kinetic world initially, after my computer science degree. So that uncomfortable world is still, there's still some stuff that I don't speak about or I can't disclose publicly. And there's a reason why I only have a first name on the front door and not a last name. So there's things like that. There was a time when I had to take a different route home every single day. But luckily now I stepped out of that shadow world a little bit more, and it's the cyber realm is different. It's less kinetic, let me put it that way. So it's a different type of threat, but still you try to keep business and private separate.
Right. Well, thank you on behalf of all of us for putting in that effort and taking the risk on behalf of our well-being. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
So you've been in this chasing bad guys and fighting against organized cybercrime for a long time now. What was it like back when you started with this? I'm not sure if it was 18 years ago, but where were we then and where we are today?
Well, when I started computer science, there officially wasn't really a major into cybercrime or forensics. There was just people hacking everything left and right, and it was fun. I think everybody who's of a certain age could remember that time. And in the Marine Corps, I didn't do a lot with computers. I chased a lot of bad people, that's for sure, in all countries all across the globe. And eventually you just transition over to the government, to the organized crime teams for the police. So it's comparable if you're in the US to the FBI. We worked on large organized crime organizations and then transitioned into cybercrime as well, because I thought hey, I have a computer science degree. I should actually do something with that. And that kind of gave way towards what we're doing now.
So, I mean, over that time, I would assume the groups got more specialized, maybe more organized. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, there is obviously, because first I was hunting terrorists and pirates, and then you go into organized crime, and then you go towards cybercrime. And it's you can draw several analogies. There's obviously the methodology of what they do is very different, and also you move through time. So even the ones that are now like the terrorists will embrace digital means. But it's like, I often draw an analogy that like the advanced cybercrime or using a lot of digital means is like at the top of the mountain when you look at methodology and technology. And like the top of the mountain, that's where there's snow, right? And there's ice. And when that snow melts, it goes down and it flows into the river, and then you have general adoption. So what we saw, for instance, with the group of very organized conventional crime, so like the mobsters and all these things, they were embracing digital means to stay out of the hands of the police. So they were using encrypted phones and all these technologies that 5 years before would only be for IT professionals or maybe cyber criminals. So you can see that trickle down. So that's something that I've noticed through the career happening quite a bit. So it's and even within the cybercrime realm, you see it as well, where certain techniques that were 5 years ago, you were like, oh, that's very specialized. It's now mainstream, left click, oh, okay, you got pwned.
Right. What about the aspect of taking out money? Like, is that just that they've moved from more traditional, whatever they were doing back in the days, over to crypto sort of things, or?
It kind of depends on the crime. So we do see that Bitcoin had a major shift. When you talk about, like, for instance, and if we talk about Bitcoin, you talk about cybercrime, you often talk about either miners or you talk about ransomware, right? Those are the two main factors. I remember starting out with a lot of the cybercrime teams, and there was like money laundering, and there were money mules, and it was all linked to banking Trojans. And that still is, there's still a large money mule element. Make no mistake, but yeah, it often gets overshadowed with the larger elements from ransomware, because money mules still play a major role in like business email compromise, for instance. However, what you could see is like either they don't always transfer it from account to account, because at the same time banks are getting smarter with fraud detection. So you would see that they would transfer it into other funds or other means or even crypto, and then they launder it through there just to obfuscate the funds. But yeah, definitely for ransomware, we see a lot of crypto going through mixing services, and then apparently, like even the Conti leaks that we studied extensively, and the Young Yu Long, and excuse me if I bastardized the name, that's butchered the name, that's not right. But the latest leak that we've studied, we see a very cash out regime that is linked to crypto, a lot of Bitcoin, and they're often in countries where exchanges are not like registered. They don't do any know your customer. They don't do any money laundering laws, and they're susceptible to bribes. So there's literally in chats you see conversations like, "Hey, you can go to a local Monero exchange and pay that person 5,000 extra, and then you can get anything you want in cash." So that's definitely what's going on.
Interesting. It's kind of like, it just reminds me of TTPs, right? When I think of TTPs, I think of like, initial access in an organization, but getting the money out, that's also a TTP, I guess.
Totally. Like when you talk about cybercrime, and especially financial cybercrime, the end objective for the criminal is to make money. And they want to ensure that they can enjoy that money that they stole or extorted or whatever. Earned is the wrong word, because I don't believe that they earned it. But they want to ensure that they can use those funds. So it's definitely TTP. In the past we helped out on investigations with the Dutch tax authority, where we uncovered a Bitcoin mixer and some other stuff. And people were asking us like, "Hey, Trellix, why are you doing this? You're a vendor, a security vendor. You're strong in the XDR space. You're strong in the endpoint space, EDR. Why do you care about crypto?" And then we had to explain. It's like, listen, there's multiple ways of disrupting the TTPs, and one of these ways is to not only look at the front, but look at the cash out. So if you make it more difficult on that side, or they think they're safe because that's where the money is laundered and it's clean, and we can get hands on that, you can actually uncover who is actually putting the money in on the front end and help arrest those people.
Right. Is it easier being on the public side, or private side, I should say? Is it easier being Trellix, or is it easier being, the Dutch police in these sort of situations?
Well, I'm not kicking down doors anytime soon, or I have to pay my contractor to fix my own door. That's for sure. So there's a different dynamic. You get the kicking doors, but you also have to do a lot of paperwork around that. and you like we call it the ultimum remedium. So it's like there's nothing past you, right? You're there to stop it. However, when I look at the private sector, what I like is that we're more flexible. We have a lot of sensors. There's a lot of people depending on us, but at the same time, our outreach and our visibility is much greater, and that makes us that we can operate where a law enforcement is often, and that's per definition, you're bound by borders because that's the legal construct that we have, and criminals are borderless. And at least in the private sector, I can operate somewhat borderless. So I can interact today with the FBI and tomorrow with the French or the Norwegians or the Dutch to get stuff done. And to me, that speed of operation and helping people out, getting them the information that they need, as well as our customers and our paid for intelligence customers, that to me is very appealing from the private sector.
So there's some positives in yeah. Of course, right? So ransomware groups. There's been some. I want to talk to you today about insiders of the in ransomware groups, because there's been a lot of that lately over the past 2 years. Why don't you start back from the first one? Like what happened then and how's it evolved?
Well, I don't know if we had the first one, but there's like when there's money around, there's always going to be snitches, right? There's like and if people don't pay each other what they're owed, you would see there's a dispute, and one of the ways to end the dispute could be like, hey, I'm giving information to the authorities or to somebody else. So we had if we look in the things that were obvious in the news, you saw like there was a disgruntled Conti employee. They leaked the playbook, which was, for me, from an intelligence point of view, was like phenomenal, because I could have all their scripts, I have everything, and I can just incorporate it in our intelligence and empower our EDR and all the tooling. So that's like, better than that, you almost can't get it. And then later on, when the Russian-Ukraine war broke out, we had a security researcher from Ukraine leaking all the Conti leaks, which gave us a lot of insight. And then we finally became public, or we gave a part of a story that actually happened a couple of years back, because we have to keep the lid on it, because only in recent years that the authorities made some arrests, and we had to like sit on the information for a while, and now it was safe to actually open up about what happened. But in 2019 and around the Christmas period, we've published a series of blogs around ReEvil in this case, and there was a very prominent affiliate that was bragging about his earnings in one weekend, which was very funny, because if you work on criminals long enough, you can see like, well, if they're in it for the money, they, for some reason, you would think like, well, if you make a lot of money, don't brag, don't show off, and just do your thing and live a happy life. Yeah, very often it's not the case, or those are just the ones that we don't see. That could also be the case. But this individual chose different, and on a Russian forum, he demonstrated he was showing off his wealth with a couple of comments, and instead of like showing off with a nice car or with a watch or with a yacht or whatever, he showed off with Bitcoin transactions, which was very interesting. So and he obfuscated half, but obviously if you have enough characters, there's a unique transaction ID, so we were able to trace that back, and we were able to confirm how he made his funds, how the money transfer was, and where it went. So we published this in a blog, and very interesting, like 2 or 3 weeks after the blog got published, we got approached by an individual. And this individual was like, and he reached out to our PR firm. So I got a call from our PR. Hey, John, we got this like weird anonymous name reaching out saying they have information. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let me read the email. So I read the email. I was like, oh, okay, I know what's going on. This is an individual. He's trying to give us or sell us information on a high profile or the threat actor that we exposed or did the expose on. So I started interacting with the individual, and it was fantastic. So apparently he was disgruntled. He did not get paid for what he thought what he was owed. So it goes back to that key mistake. If you don't pay people what they're owed, they're going to snitch or they're going to throw you under the bus. And in this case, this person had a change of heart. They wanted to come clean, and they gave us a lot of information. However, they did want to have money for certain types of information, and obviously, we're from an ethical point of view, we cannot do that as our company. But we were in close contact with a lot of law enforcement agencies because we were part of this working group against evil called Gold Dust, where we kind of like dropped it and said, like, hey, we have an individual that's really he has information on criminal X and all this stuff, but he wants money. Who is willing to interact? So one authority, which we will not name, raised their hand, and they said, like, yeah, sure. But they said, like, yeah, we need 2 weeks for backstopping. And I was like, okay, great. And what that means is that they need to set up like fake accounts or whatever that's untraceable to them. And in the meantime, I am just emailing from my corporate account because the person already approached me. So I was like, yeah, go ahead. I'll use my corporate account to keep the ties and the relationship warm. But that gave me about 2 weeks to interact with the individual. And funny enough is they were very forthcoming. They shared a lot of info about the TTPs, the tools that they used, how the internal relationship is, which to me was actually more fascinating than just getting the phone number of a person. No, I wanted to know, like, who's calling the shots? How is this structured? What's the hierarchy? Who's doing what? And he also shared screenshots and all kinds of things. So for us, that was phenomenal when that came in our path, because we were like, oh, this is great. We can learn a lot from this. And that was already in 2019. But it does show if you do not pay the people and you break the trust and the loyalty between the group that you work in, more likely than people will throw you under the bus.
Right. When is the last time your last report that you just, when are you going to release that? Or did you just release it?
We have one report that was released beginning of December for the quarter number 3. And as we speak, we're working on a new report that's coming out mid-February for quarter 4.
Cool. Well, then I'll ask about quarter 3. What were some of like the highlights, the things that you thought were interesting, or some of like the key takeaways?
Oh my God, now you're putting me on the spot.
Give me the clickbait.
No. Things that we found very interesting is like one of the things we do is not only we look at the statistics of the malware that we have seen, things that I find very interesting, and I think like any of our or your listeners or viewers should be very alert to, is the use of non-malicious tools, lol bins and scripts and all that stuff. Because more often than not, you will see a threat actor accessing a network in some form or fashion. Either they have credentials, they use commodity malware, vulnerability, whatever. And the way they move through your network, the lateral movement, the privilege escalation, establishing a backdoor and persistence, that is 9 times out of 10 what we see now is done with non-malicious tools. And I really encourage any of our customers, but also anyone I see, is like, hey, we're not doing the best job as the industry or as everyone to detecting this. We have the tools. EDR does a phenomenal job, and you have things linked. But that's where we need to focus, because that's where you stop the breach, or you can stop the breach in its tracks, because you're not stopping, you're already breached, but at least you can stop the horrible outcome of having a ransomware attack.
The very unfortunate long-standing war in Ukraine, right? How has that affected the organized crime, cybercrime industry?
Yeah. That was... if we go back, and it's almost 1 year now, right?
I know.
Around this time, I believe it was this January 8th, the FSB arrested some individuals that were tied into ReEvil. At that time, I was like, oh, this is a sign on the wall. This could be very interesting, even though it took a while for them to lead up to this. But this might be the start of a very, let alone fragile cooperation. And the response from threat actors on the underground was like, "Oh shoot, it's going on. The FSB is now targeting us. It's over." And you saw some people panicking. Well, sure enough, then not shortly after the Ukraine war and the Russia invaded Ukraine and the war broke out, and you could see this like almost a divide where Ukraine cybercriminals and Russian cybercriminals, basically anyone in the former USSR, the CIS countries, were collaborating because of financial gain, and they kind of like put politics aside. you could see politics become main stage even within the cyber criminals, and you could see the clear divide. Well, the Conti leaks is a perfect example. You see cyber criminals like Ukraine cyber criminals join Ukraine cyber army, or at least that's what we assume, and they tend to fight for their country. So you see a kind of like shift, as well as like all the sanctions being put on Russia, that we're like, oh, how does this impact a lot of the cyber criminals? Because it's going to make it more difficult. Well, sure enough, they all find a way. And if we look back at 2022, you see that there's still a lot of cybercrime going on, and still a lot of ransomware. And I think money will find a way to flow back to the criminal, even though things are sanctioned. We do see an uptick in hacktivism. That's one of the things that we saw from 2022. That's like the old thing. If you go back in the early days, in one of the courses that I did, where they say like, well, you have different kinds. It's like nation states and cybercrime and hacktivism. You're like, who does hacktivism? And then you had like Julian Assange type of WikiLeaks type of era with Anonymous, and that kind of changed now that you see like, well, okay, these are groups of individuals that have obviously a varied level of skill, but they're bound together by a common goal or a political belief. And sure enough, they're now doing denial of service attacks, defacements, and information gathering and leaking. But give these people a little bit more powerful tools, and it could actually have the collateral damage could be pretty severe. Like we only need a kind of I'm not saying WannaCry or a wormable type of virus, and you could see that the spillover could be disastrous for a lot of our customers or the world. So that's something that does give me concern. The Russian underground is still live. There's still a lot of people talking about stuff, and it's still ongoing. So I guess criminals will be criminals.
You know, we saw from the Conti leaks that there was a somewhat obvious, I'm not sure if it would hold up in court, but there was an obvious link between Conti affiliates and the Conti group with the Russian government. Is that just happening with like the Russian government and you know, inside of their, is that just a Russian phenomenon, or do we see that happening in China and other countries that are often associated with cybercrime?
Yeah, I'm not the 100% expert on the Chinese underground. What I do know, it's a bit different. Nation state teams are mostly recruited from universities or have purposely built complete units around it. That being said, the Chinese underground, the financial, is very dispersed and very large actually, and there's less hierarchy, so there's more ad hoc type of collaboration and deals being made. So, but it's not unthinkable that somebody is recruiting in those communities for government entities. When it comes to the Russian underground, like from the Conti group, and this might be my gut feeling or my own bias, is that whenever a cyber criminal group grows to a certain level, they become successful to a certain way, they earn or they acquire large amount of funds, so their behavior kind of stands out. You would see in some form or fashion that needs to be there will be some kind of, either the government looks the other way, or there's a tit for tat type of engagement or ruling, but there's something going on. And with Conti, that was we always had that suspicion, and then you read the chats, you read it directly from their own keyboard, and then it's like, yeah, see, this is not surprising. This is something they have a conversation. They think that nobody's watching. They think that it's just like, hey, they're friends, and they speak freely. But yeah, you can see that there is a definite influence. What that level of influence is, that is very hard to determine, right? It's is it directed? Is it allowed? Is there like an agenda? Are there potential targets being shared? Or is it that they've targeted an organization and they think like, oh, this might be interesting to the state. Maybe we hand over this information so they can use the information and we can keep on going with our operation. It could be all of the above. And and that's very hard to determine for 100% certainty.
There would be there's a lot of cool stories that we'll probably never hear about how that actually works in practice, I guess. But usually, yeah. Maybe one day somebody will contact you with a really juicy story, and I'm looking forward to hearing that one.
Yeah.
So last question for you before I let you go for today. When this war is over, what do you expect to happen on the cyber crime front? Mean question. I know it's impossible to answer, but like, what would you just expect?
Yeah, and when is the war over? That's also a good question. Because like cyber weapons or cyber activity, even though you signed a peace treaty, it's deniable. So you can say like it wasn't us. So it kind of depends on the outcome of what we're seeing. But let's say there's a stalemate or there's some level of stability. Depending on the sanctions on Russia, what we see now, there is either Western society is more alert to it, or it is happening at a larger scale. So we see an uptick in espionage, either like conventional espionage. Well, in Europe, if you read the newspapers, there's SVR agents being uncovered like almost every week. The Netherlands, they expelled 17 SVR agents and GRU agents last year. So that's what's going on. So if that's happening conventionally, you can expect the same happening from a cyber espionage point of view. So if there's sanctions, you can imagine like certain industries within either Europe or the US become a very interesting target. At the same time, when I like, maybe I should get a crystal ball or something to predict the future. I don't know, but for Ukraine, to me is we know that certain cyber criminals have joined the army within the Ukraine, or at least offered their services to attack the aggressor. I am very curious what will happen after like everything dies down and they go back to normal. Are they going to pick up a life of cybercrime or not? And as well as Western society, I know a lot of the authorities have identified a lot of these individuals. How is the Ukrainian government going to react to this? Are they going to say like, well, no, this person actually fought on the good side when push comes to shove, so we're giving them general pardon? Or are they going to work towards an extradition? Because it's like, you've done those crimes in the past, so we still hold you accountable for it. So to me, you can look at it from a criminal point of view or a law point of view, but it very quickly goes into a political realm, which is, I don't even know what the outcome is. But that's stuff that like I'm not worried, but I'm wondering, like, okay, where does this end? There's all these different types of outcomes. But yeah, as we know, time will tell, and it might actually be something surprising.
Yeah, hey, maybe it ends up being that all these those individuals you were just talking about that had previously attacked, the U.S. or some European country, that they say, okay, maybe it comes the opposite of what's happening in Russia. Maybe you're only allowed to attack Russia and their friends and leave NATO alone.
Yeah, who knows?
Interesting. But I guess that will be a topic for the next episode, John.
Well, happy to be on board.
Yeah, and hopefully that episode comes sooner than later, because that would mean that there's an end, and then we can move on to the next problem that the world has to face. But John, in the meantime, I thank you for your time, and
Thanks,
I applaud all your efforts and all the great work that you and your team are doing over at Trellix, and keep it up. We'll talk next time.
Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Awesome. Pleasure, John.
Thank
you.